Hey, Bruce Naylor here, the Frugal Tech, also the boomer consumer. I'm a baby boomer. Why not take ownership of it? And I kind of look at technology through the eyes of somebody that's been around technology for decades. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the 2018 Mac Mini that I bought about a month ago and kind of my experiences with it so far. And because I know there's a lot of people interested in this particular machine, as this the most affordable desktop that Apple currently offers, and it can be a quite powerful computer, but there's some caveats, and that's what I want to discuss with you. What I like about it, what I don't like about it, and kind of share it with you in this video. Now, computers in general can be a very personal thing, and this is not a Windows versus Mac or Linux type of video. I enjoy the Mac for video editing. I enjoy particularly using Final Cut Pro 10, although I have to admit I'm becoming more and more of a fan of DaVinci Resolve. But be that as it may, I purchased this Mac Mini for $1,499. So this cost $1,500, and I sold my 2014 MacBook Pro for $900, and then to that add the cost of an eGPU enclosure. I bought the Razer Core X, and I had a MSI RX 480 video card kind of laying around, and so I'm using that currently in the eGPU. It's not the most powerful video card on the market today, but it certainly does the job that I want it to do. And through it all, my net upgrade cost, from the 2014 MacBook Pro to the 2018 Mac Mini, so going from a quad-core i7 with 16 gigs of RAM and taking that up to the 2018 Mac Mini with 32 gigs of memory, come to, I believe, almost $1,200, give or take. That's not too bad. I had several years of use out of the MacBook Pro, and now I have this Mac Mini, which I intend on keeping for 5 years. So be that as it may, that's kind of what the entry fee for me personally to get into the Mac Mini is at this time. So spec-wise, the Mac Mini that I bought has the Intel Core i7. This the 8700B, I believe, is the one that they use in there. It's a mobile CPU that's in there, 6 cores. I think the base clock on it's 3.2 gigahertz. And I also ordered it with a 512 gig SSD on board. That's one of the things that is not upgradable on the computer, is your internal storage. And I felt with 512 gig and using that in combination of an external SSD, that'd be more than enough storage for me on this computer. To that, I added, again, a Razer Core X eGPU and an RX 480. So it makes for a pretty potent system. So some of the things I really like about the Mac Mini, and I think a lot of people will probably agree on at least most of this list, and one of them is that just the aesthetics of the computer is small, compact form factor, and I feel a very aesthetically pleasing computer. I'm at that point in my life that I no longer want great big computers everywhere. I like the smaller form factor. Heck, if I get a hernia having to lug around a computer and moving it, I don't want that anymore in my life. And that makes the Mac Mini a really attractive desktop computer. Another thing I really like about the Mac Mini is the inclusion of the 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, the 2 USB ports, and the HDMI port, as well as a headphone out port on the computer. I really like having all those ports. And I've already got 3 of the 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports in use. So I have the eGPU, I have an external SSD, and then I have my iPad that charges up and syncs with the Mac Mini via USB-C connection for using that Thunderbolt 3 port. So that's what I'm doing with the ports right now. Okay, another thing I like is the having the 6-core Intel i7 CPU. Very, very fast. very snappy. Definitely, I feel a difference between that and the 2014 MacBook Pro. It's definitely a faster CPU, and CPU intensive workloads never seem to be a problem with that chip. Now, have I checked for thermal throttling? I've been asked that in the comments, so forth. No, I have not. I just sit down and I edit my videos on the computer, and like I'm filming this in 4K right now, but I've never had a problem with this particular setup, chomping right through 4K video. I couldn't be more pleased. And of course, I like how fast the internal SSD is on it. It's like 1900 megabytes per second write speed and 2700 on the read speed. I mean, it's lightning fast. It's so fast that generally on one of my projects, because they're not that involved, I can typically edit right off the primary hard drive and not even touch the SSD, which I should do. That's best practices, admittedly. But generally, I can do most of my stuff just on the internal and not skip a beat on this thing. It is wicked fast. Okay, let's talk about what I dislike about the Mac Mini. But the first thing is not just a Mac Mini complaint. It's just Apple in general not supporting the latest generation of NVIDIA graphics cards. Because I've got a spare 1080 Ti that I could have used in this eGPU, but no, not supported. So that's why I had to fall back to the RX 480. That's an Apple problem altogether that I wish that they would address. Second on the list, as you know, when I said that I like the small form factor of the Mac Mini, well, the eGPU kind of offsets it. So you have this very small, beautiful little desktop computer, but then you've got this additional box on your desk containing the graphics card. It's not exactly a look that I was going for, so it kind of negates the eGPU, kind of negates the form factor of the Mac Mini. Is something to think about. And speaking of the eGPU, because there's no dedicated discrete graphics on the Mac Mini, that's an additional cost that you got to spend out of your pocket in order to get the maximum performance out of your Mac Mini. I sure wish they would have included discrete graphics with the Mac Mini. And one more thing about the eGPU. Even though the Mac Mini is really, really whisper quiet, and that's another thing I do like about it, how quiet it is, well, the fan on the eGPU makes some noise that I wish I didn't have to contend with. Did you know there's no microphone on the Mac Mini? I got a new keyboard that actually has a button to pull up Hey Siri, and guess what? You can't use it because there's no mic in the Mac Mini. Why not put in a small microphone? Now, another downside to the Mac Mini, even though you give us a great selection of ports, one thing that I think you missed that's really important to a lot of people is an SD card slot. Why not put an SD card slot in the Mac Mini? So now I've got to hook up an external SD card reader in order to use it. Just an additional cost, another thing to contend with. Now, when editing in Final Cut Pro, without the external eGPU, when you're doing 4K video and scrubbing through the timeline and so forth, you will get drop frames. So if you want a smooth experience, you got to have the eGPU. So that UHD 630, just not up to the task. And lastly, it's the price of the Mac Mini. For what you get in the entry-level Mac Mini, it's just overpriced, and it just goes up from there. You realize a fully loaded Mac Mini can set you back $4,200, and that's not including a monitor, keyboard, or mouse. Now, I've talked a lot about the eGPU, and I pulled up the Cinebench scores on here, and for OpenCL, we're running at around 80.4 frames per second, and a CPU score of 1024. It's not fantastic. It's not great. The RX 480 is a much older generation GPU, but it's the one I had on hand. And if I could use that 1080 Ti, it'd be a different ballgame. But I can't. It's what I got to work with right now. Yes, I'll probably upgrade the card to a Vega 56 somewhere down the road. But right now, it's not a big priority for me because the Mac Mini is doing basically pretty decent for what I needed to do. So if you're a Final Cut Pro 10 user, the external GPU you're going to use really heavily for working with the timeline, effects, etc. What it won't help you with is rendering video if you're using H.264 or H.264 because it uses QuickSync that's built into the Intel chipset. and therefore you're not really seeing any benefit. In fact, that eGPU is just sitting there basically doing nothing. But as soon as you start scrubbing around the timeline, applying effects, filters, etc., then it really shows its advantage. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. It's really not tremendously faster than the MacBook Pro was on rendering video. It's very fast, don't get me wrong, but it's just going to sit there more or less dumb as a post when you're using exporting to H.264. However, the real magic is if you have Blackmagic design their DaVinci Resolve, huge difference. I can edit 1080p faster than real time and 4K video in basically real time. And I'm going to be very, very happy with that. I couldn't, DaVinci Resolve was almost unusable on my 2014 MacBook Pro, but on this Mac Mini, it flies, all right? It just flies. So, do I regret buying the Mac Mini? I do not. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. However, my net upgrade cost wasn't terrible by selling my old MacBook Pro, and eventually, when I sell this Mac Mini, that money will be used probably towards buying another new Mac. For me, it worked out. So as a consumer, somebody that's really more interested in what they can use a computer for than the specs on which it is built, I'm pretty pleased all in all. And I hope Apple in the next iteration gives us an option for discrete graphics so you don't necessarily have to buy an eGPU, but it's a great option to have. But open it up and get the drivers going to support NVIDIA graphics cards rather than just having us rely on the AMD graphics cards. And that's it. So that is where I'm at with this machine. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.